Hey everyone, I have my good friend Scotty Lewis here, and I just had the idea to get on here and allow Scotty to share his testimony. He was healed in a pretty powerful way, even though it was a little bit more gradual than some of the typical healings that you see that happen, in an instant. And so I thought it'd be cool to just hear about, Scotty, maybe you can tell us, what it was like when you received diagnosis. What was your life like um, before that? Were you really active? Did the diagnosis disrupt a lot of your life plans? Maybe we can just start there.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a bit of a long, convoluted story because I found out in 2019 that I had Lyme disease, but I had been sick for a lot longer. It was only in 2019 that it really started to manifest in a certain way physically, where I needed help up and down the stairs and stuff like that. Um, so with Lyme disease, you get it through ticks. And at some point in my life, like a decade before, around 10 or something, when I was 10, got bit by a tick. And yeah, so looking back, I see how it had I remember having crazy joint pain, a lot of weird skin, mental symptoms over the years, fatigue and stuff. Um, I went from pretty active to just not being able to run one lap around the football field.
Now,
And
did that happen kind of suddenly, or was it like
yeah, yeah, it happened pretty quick. Apparently my family was just, I mean, I just was like, oh, I just started sports. I guess I'm not that athletic. I was like, everyone else has endurance and I don't. But looking back, I remember having this crazy high fever where I was hallucinating. I remember having this crazy feeling that felt like I was hallucinating for months and months and months after that, on and off for a while. And then, yeah, I think I got reinfected later in life. So yeah, I had a lot of significant joint pain, random eye problems. A lot of it was just I went from being running around my neighborhood a lot as a kid to I literally did not have the endurance to no matter how much I did sports, I couldn't run very far, would just get exhausted. Yeah, and also cognitively, it was affecting my mind. So just in terms of focus in school, I couldn't really do well in school. It wasn't like I can't focus. It was like when I try to fill out the answers on a worksheet, the harder I try, it was kind of like a Chinese finger trap where the harder you pull, the harder it
Yeah.
fights back, the harder it. So a lot of my life just academically and things like that were like that, which I found out later when I did get diagnosed. It was through some brain scans that basically the guy was able to point to the point, or this showed brain activity. He showed my executive functioning part of my brain that was just not getting adequate blood flow and basically would shut down when I was trying to concentrate.
Wow.
So so Lyme disease for a long time had been messing with my brain. When I had that brain scan, he told me that my brain looks like he was like, you look like you've been on meth for several years. He said that I had the brain scan of a drug addict, which basically meant that my brain was toxic. My system internally was toxic. And so since I didn't ever do any drugs, he was like, or it's like a prolonged chronic underlying illness. So yeah, I'm trying to find the relevant points of the story. So yeah, basically from 2000, so I had a lot of weird stuff, but around 2014, right after high school, something in my mind snapped. Just having some delusions, just a lot of weird mental things that I could never really put words to. You include the reality of normal stress, normal mental seasons we all have, then a disease messing with your brain that you don't know you have, then the real spiritual enemy that's against us. And yeah, it was pretty confusing. Um,
Yeah, so you were just experiencing just kind of a full on assault, like the physical,
yeah,
the mental,
did
emotional.
not know what was going on. Yeah, I ended up not, because I had never been depressed a day in my life. Like, I'd always been able to trust my mind. And then it was like somebody flipped a switch, everything just shut off.
Yeah.
And looking back now, I see things that I always was just like, oh, I'm just really depressed or the demons are after me. But looking back, I see I was not well physically and it like in my brain, because I was having seeming delusions. I was having all kinds of weird stuff. What I thought were panic attacks, but I would just be like seizing, like convulsing,
Yeah.
which also would give me panic attacks. So it was kind of like just tacked on and on. Um, but yeah, and then around 2017, I went on a whole journey to get into really good shape, actually, which was really beneficial for me, not knowing I was treating a disease. I was eating real clean and doing all that stuff. But right when I lived in Texas, it was 2017, and I started to have the weirdest stuff. I had already had a lot of weird stuff, but I would remember convulsing and just being like, the narrative I told myself, I was like, this type of stuff just happens to me. I started to have trouble speaking. I started to stutter out of nowhere. I just couldn't talk. It took me like a minute to get through a tiny sentence. Yeah, I just started to have so many weird things going on.
That's when I kind of first heard about you. I just can't remember you were, trying to become like a personal trainer. I just knew you're really in shape.
Yeah, that that was 2017. Yeah. And I remember I lost like 30 something pounds and just got into really good shape. I just went wholeheartedly after it. And my whole life ever since I started doing training, and I always played sports, but I always felt like I was training for something. And maybe it's just in my family because my brother's this way too. But like, I was always like, I need to be training. Like I feel like I'm preparing to be some kind of Navy SEAL or something. Or I just knew that I don't know if I knew. There was just something inside of me that didn't make sense now that I think about it, that I wanted to push myself.
Yeah.
To be prepared. And when I ended up getting more sick years later, I was about 215-ish pounds of just like muscle. And if I hadn't had all of the fitness and strength and muscle and healthy habits and self-discipline that I'd gained for my health, at that point, I think it would have crushed me even more than it did. Because I guess I'll kind of go through this story a little bit more clearly so I can hit the major points.
Yeah.
After a lot of there's just a long list of weird stuff that I couldn't explain. I just randomly would feel like I was on like psychedelics or something just out of nowhere, have trouble speaking.
Yeah. At what point were you, at the worst? Like,
mentally was in 2018, 2019. I had moved from Texas to Atlanta. Actually, I don't know. It was really bad in different ways throughout the years. Because I remember 2000, I went to the mental hospital a couple times in 2015. I remember 2016. I remember one time just laying on the floor, hitting my head against the wall, like just literally just laying on a floor, going like this for like 30 minutes. And that's just all I was doing. And I don't remember, like I couldn't get up and I wasn't really choosing. That's just what I was doing, It was just weird stuff like that. So that seems like a pretty low, but I don't know if that was the low.
Yeah, so you got the diagnosis with
Yeah.
Lyme disease, and I know there's no real like great treatment for that.
Yeah.
It's kind of all over the board. So when you got that diagnosis, did you have any idea like you could be supernaturally healed, or um, was that even a thought that was running through your mind?
Yeah, I think I always expected it. I just assumed I would get better. God healing has always just been a matter of fact in my mind. Because when I did get diagnosed later, it turned more physical. Like I couldn't make it upstairs. Um, I was just having seizures all the time. But I knew because when I moved back here to Texas with my parents in March of 2019, and the idea was get treated for a month, get back on my feet, and go back. I never went back. That was 2019. So it's been, almost 4 years now. Um, so it was a really hard line to walk. The longer I was sick, completely dependent on the people around me, the more I had to wrestle with the idea of that being my life forever.
Yeah.
And I simultaneously knew that if God even thought it with like a with a positive in his mind, with a yes in his mind, that it would happen when he chose it. And that ultimately it was his decision of the when and where and how. And that's a very tense place to be, but they can both be a yes of, I might never be healed and I'm just on the floor convulsing and screaming all the time and getting paralyzed and stuck all over the house alone, or having just like my brain just feels like it's eating itself all the time. And that might just be what it is. And God can heal me, and I believe he will. And I could be wrong, and I wasn't. So it's just a very tense place to be.
Right. So I guess what was the moment like when, you really felt this faith come on you, or this faith rise up to lead you to the idea of like, today's the day. Like, that's a huge sign of, I would call it a gift of faith.
Yeah. No. That's hard to answer because for a lot of different cool spiritual things, including me coming back to Jesus during that whole decade season, spending some time away from the faith, like just rebelling in my mind, being like, I don't know if I believe in God. The way the Lord has tended to work with me largely has been over time. Like the reason I mentioned that was somebody asked me, when did you come back to Jesus? Like, and I was like, I don't think there was a moment. I don't think there was a moment where I was back in the faith, I don't know if there was a moment where the faith welled up. I remember I had one moment while I was sick where I felt like God took something from me physically, and I felt different after that. But maybe it was in layers, but I knew that, I don't know, I was getting prayed. You're forcing me to to think about it a little bit. I remember the reason I had texted you that one time, and we didn't know each other super well at that point, where I was just praying and your name just kept popping in my head. And I was like, hey, I think you just keep popping in my head. Would you pray for me? And I was thinking I would just go to you and you'd lay hands, and you're like, I don't have any healing services or anything. And I was like, I'm not asking for service time, man. Come pray for me. And you're the one who mentioned celebration. I don't know. I don't know if I had a moment.
I remember you telling me about you were watching The Chosen.
Oh, yeah.
That really.
I remember knowing that I was going to go to Celebration church, and I had planned to do it before, but I don't know. I just kind of eventually decided to. Maybe I always thought if the Lord is going to heal me and he knows the time and date, then I'm always walking towards it. And it could be in 2 years, 10 years, tomorrow. I just don't know. But if he's decided and that's his official will, I was like, I don't know if there's anything I could do other than keep asking and praying, and then I'll get there when I get there.
Yeah, just try whatever.
Yeah. And so some part of me feels that way about that date is I was always asking for healing and always seeking him inside of it, and learning to not make healing the agenda of my whole life though was difficult.
Yeah, I mean that's another tension place.
That's a big place of tension. But yeah, it was, I remember being like, okay, I'm going to show up, and I knew I was going to show up early. I was like, I'm going to show up like for the first service because I want to catch the end of the first service because they do a healing thing there. And I literally thought if I'm there for the end of the first service, then I'll get 2 chances at getting prayed for. Like I'll get 2 chances of getting a word from the Lord because I'm going to be there for 2 services. And but at the time, I never ever watched shows at night. It was kind of part of my like life rules. Is I was like I turn off media at a certain point. And plus, as most people know, if you're watching shows with people, a series with people, you have to wait to watch those series with the people. You can't just move about to the next episode.
Yeah.
I broke several rules, and something came over me that I was like, I want to watch The Chosen, and I'm just gonna do it. I don't care. And it seems like a small thing, but looking back, it was like there was a nudge that I did something out of the ordinary. And I watched it, and it was the one where Jesus heals the guy who's the paralytic by the pool. And the whole thing was chronicling this guy who's just been sick his whole life, and Jesus walked up to him and looked him in the eyes and was like, do you want to be healed? And I remember sitting there being like, like I cried watching it alone upstairs, and I was like, yes. But it really was just like, that was just a plain as day. I was like, yeah, like I feel like this is to me right now. Yeah. And I woke up the next day and I was on my way, and another divine coincidence was there was a guy who he runs an urgent care clinic, and he has prayer as part of, he has a prayer room and he prays for the patients and everything.
Wow.
I'd reached out to him a long time ago, like months before, and been like, hey man, like I had a dream that I went to your clinic and you prayed for me and just felt spiritual. So he's like, cool. And then we didn't talk for months, like at all. And then on the way, I remember the Lord just leading me. Oh, I do have an answer to your question. On the way, I just felt like the Lord was like, pray all the way there. And it's like an hour plus drive for me. He was like, pray all the way there. And I just like knew to put on these like different worship songs about miracles. It was kind of a whole 12-hour period from the moment I watched that show the night before. Really the moment I woke up the next morning. Looking back, I was in a spiritual like fervor the whole time. Maybe in it, I wasn't aware, but I realized like kind of like the men on the road, was the road to Emmaus, were like,
they said their heart
back
burning.
Yeah, they were like, weren't our hearts burning inside of us? Like in the moment, they weren't like, hey man, like your heart burning right now? Like they were like later, they're like, wow, like our hearts were burning. And that's how I feel right now, looking back and going, no, yeah, my heart was on fire the whole time. My heart was burning inside of me, and I didn't realize the extent that like to which it was burning until later. But yeah, I was listening to these songs about miracles. Well, actually before that guy I told you about, I had a dream where he prayed for me in his clinic. On the way, he hadn't talked to me for months. I get a message from him where he said, hey, why don't you come by my clinic sometime? I would love to pray for you, like see what the Lord wants to reveal. So there's like two divine coincidences,
You had the dream.
where it's like, I had the dream, the chosen, same guy from the dream that morning while I'm going to get prayed for texts me where in my dream, he's the one who prayed for my body. And he's like, why don't you come? We'll pray for your body. And so then I'm on my way listening to like, too good to not believe. Like, listening to, yeah. Listening to miracles on miracles, like all the miracle songs I could find. And I realized now I was just crying on the way there. Like my heart was burning. And I showed up and I remember having this image in my mind of me barefoot. And I was like, all right. I don't know if it was relevant, but I went in and took off my shoes. And what's interesting is I think they close it off kind of like the sanctuary for the end of the healing service, maybe to protect the space. And I remember walking up and looking back, I feel like there was a barrier for some reason. There was just a barrier. It practically was that, they're shutting it off. But I remember just being like, can I go in there? And the lady was kind of like, well, they're finishing up. It just felt like something weird, not necessarily negative from them. And maybe it was just a spiritual, I don't know how to describe it, but I remember just being like, can I just go in now? And they're like, they seemed like taking it back. They're like, okay, like we'll take it. And I don't know how to describe that moment. It was just weird. It was like a noticeably weird event, but I walk in and I'm barefoot.
Like socks or just like
barefoot. Socks are gone. I am barefoot. Oh, and at this point, like I said, when I got sick, I was about 215 pounds of muscle. At this point, I was 170 pounds.
Wow.
And I had lost all the muscle. At that point, my body had just broken down a lot. I had a couple like shoulder injuries from before that were held together with muscle and stuff. And after some really prolonged, intense seizures, I soon after dislocated my shoulder just laying on the floor, re-injured the other one. I had torn my meniscus. It was just like the treatment had ruined my gut. Like every part of me was just messed up. I was 170 pounds. I was like what I weighed when I was 15. And I was limping and I couldn't use my arms very well. Everything, it was just like, I'm like seizing all the time. You just never know. But I think I just knew. I just expected it. And I remember thinking, okay, well, I heard that Jesus is healing people at Celebration Church. I know he's here with me, but for some reason, there's something about he has decided that at this location, he's going to do these things for this season. So, I don't know. I thought I'll be the woman who goes and grabs the robe.
Yeah.
And so I was there and he actually mentioned that. He was like, there's something about coming up to the altar. I don't know how to explain it, but it's like when the woman goes and grabs the robe. And I was like, saying that earlier, I'm probably going to go there.
Wow.
And so I was like, there was just something, like there were just these little hindrances, like these little thoughts that were like, oh, wait till the service is over. Or like, even just then when I was saying that, I remember thinking like, oh, well, Jesus can heal me here in Sugar Land. I don't have to go up to the Woodlands. Or, oh, like I'm in the back of the room. Jesus, just heal me. I don't need to go up.
Yeah.
But I ended up just being like, all right, I'm going up. So I went up and there was there were like 30 plus people. Like it wasn't just me and like some other guy. I was just in a crowd and I walked up. I'd never been there in my life. I'm tiny. I'm limping. I'm crying. I'm all the things. Very sick. A stranger. And I just like couldn't decide what to ask the Lord. I was like, for some reason I had a scenario. It was like where I've got to choose what the Lord's going to heal me for. Like he's going to be like, out of the 7 things that are wrong with you.
It's like,
I don't know why that brain. Yeah. Why that, that's the way my mind worked at the time. But, I just ended up kneeling and putting my hands on my head, and I just like knelt down to the ground and I sobbed and I just put my hands on my head and I was like, my mind, like my brain, because the seizures and the fatigue and just the illness and all the other physical symptoms, for me, the worst torment was in here, was what I've experienced, like having something wrong with my brain.
Yeah.
If I just thought I would rather be like, if I was healed in my body but had to experience what I was experiencing mentally, and like in my neurological system, like I was like, I would rather stay sick and just not have to deal with that. And so I just was like, Lord, heal my mind. And I start sob crying. So right about then, Pastor Frankie, the pastor of the church in the Woodlands, was like, is someone here named Lewis? My name is Scott Lewis. For those of you watching who don't know that.
What's your last name?
Yeah, Lewis is my last name. And this is what I believe the Lord was speaking my language, because Lewis means renowned warrior. And that's the name God chose to call me by when I was the smallest, weakest, sickest like I'd ever been. And for me, that's my love language. I've always said if somebody writes me a poem or something, that's like my deepest love language, and that's poetic. Because that's not how I felt. I didn't feel like a renowned warrior.
Yeah.
But yeah, so he was like, Lewis, something wrong with maybe the back of your head or your neck. He's like trying to be like hearing from the Lord. He's like, I don't know, like he's like, I'm pretty sure, I could be wrong. And I'm sitting there like all these circumstances happening, and for some reason I'm sitting there like I gotta know that I know, because this doesn't quite seem. And he's like feeling around he was like, Louise, is it a girl? Like, I'm pretty sure I'm hearing the Lord. I was like, okay. And I was just like, so I go up and, kind of tell him I was like, my name's Scott Lewis. Lewis is my last name. He's like, what's wrong? I was like, I have Lyme disease. I was like, mess with my nervous system and my brain. Also, both my shoulders, my knee, and my gut, all my fingers and my toes. He was like, okay, I think it's you. So he starts praying, and it's just funny because it wasn't like it didn't feel like an ambush necessarily, where I wasn't expecting it. It came out of nowhere, happened in a day, and then life moved on. It was like years in the making. It was a long process. Where I think about it now, I think every moment mattered. Even the small ones, even the little words God gave me and the things he whispered to me when I was like alone on the floor in my bedroom, inviting him into my grief and suffering, those matter. It's not like all of that was just filler until I finally got my miracle. Like, all of it matters. It's all part of the story. And frankly, those things, the things that the Lord whispered to me on the floor at 2 a.m., like when I'm convulsing and I'm just trying to meet with him in my mind and go into the secret place while my body's freaking out, the things he said there, those actually have been more powerful and impactful in my life.
Yeah.
In terms of my soul, my eternal soul, and deepest self, than the healing. The healing was the depth and power of the healing was informed by those things and amplified by them, just spiritually for me and relationally with me and the Lord. Yeah, so he prayed, he brought me up on stage and pointed at my face in front of all these people and said, memorize his face. He's going to have an incredible testimony. And I'm sitting there and I was like, I'm like crying, and I'm like in like a giant oversized sweater, just like,
it's this crazy guy.
Yeah. And so after that, I stayed for the next service, and I did collapse on the floor, but I was so used to collapsing on the floor that I don't actually know if that was spiritual or my body was just stressed and was like, nope. Like, I don't know. But
I've been here for a while.
Yeah. But that week, so that kind of your question earlier was like, when did the faith rise up? The faith was building, but the faith, like that 12 hours started to ramp up. Like looking back, I'm like, oh, my heart was burning. I was there.
Yeah.
Um,
And did you feel anything when Frankie prayed for you? Did you feel heat or electricity or
I just relaxed.
stations?
It was kind of like, I didn't know that I was carrying around so much tension in my whole body.
Yeah.
I didn't feel anything that was like a supernatural, like, oh, so much as I just suddenly was relaxed. And I just knew, I had a knowing that this was from the Lord for me. And I didn't know what was going to happen, what wasn't going to happen. I just knew Lord has called me by name to meet with me and to have me prayed for right now.
Yeah.
And for me, the difference came over like that week. I just like had energy.
And did you start like, we only have 5 minutes because I'm on
Yeah.
a Zoom account, but did you start trying to do things that you weren't able to do?
Yeah, that week I started exercising a little bit, which was still hard. Obviously, I'd just been sitting around for like 2 years doing nothing while my body wasted away. But yeah, I went for a walk. I walked around half my neighborhood, which is a little less than a mile, and I could not do that before. I was at the walk to the end of the street level and then hope you make it back. That's where I was. But I remember starting to exercise and walking around the neighborhood.
Wow.
And that was huge for me. And I quit having seizures. I used to have them all the time.
Like daily or multiple times a day?
Daily.
Daily.
Yeah. Pretty much daily. Yeah. There was a time when I was having them a lot.
Yeah.
Like multiple times a day. Then it was daily. And then sometimes, might have a day off or two. But
And then, people always ask this question, but, were you able to kind of medically verify that something had changed, you'd been healed?
So I know that for one, I had a certain, like one of the tick-borne illnesses was Rocky Mountain spotted fever. And the next test I got, she was like, the only thing she said about the test was that it wasn't active anymore. So I was like, I don't know if it went to sleep, but it's not awake anymore. And actually, ironic timing, I reached out to my doctor this month. I'm getting some kits coming in that I'm going to send off to get tested again to see if I still have Lyme disease in my system. So I know that I was one way and I couldn't do anything, and now I can run and lift weights and I don't have seizures and I'm not having crazy mental experiences anymore all the time. So I know that something happened and I'm now better.
Yeah.
But this month, within the next month, actually, I should have a medical explanation. And I don't know what God healed. Did he take it? Did he not? I don't know. But I know my experience.
Yeah.
Immediate shift in my capacity to actually get better.
Yeah, and that is a mystery to me, because I know people that have been healed of, they have surgically implanted metal objects, and it's like they lost certain range of motion, but they get healed and the metal object is still there, but they have the full range of motion, which doesn't make sense, right?
Yeah.
So I know that in God's ability to heal, there is a lot of mystery, and a lot of times you just gotta just be thankful for the healing when it happens. If it happens, I know there are some people that aren't healed, but I do know that, even just sharing the testimony, hearing other people's stories can inspire other people to even know that healing is possible. Because if you didn't know that healing was possible, you would have never made, that trek to even go to the place or to even take your dream seriously.
Yeah.
Where you had your friend praying for you. And so we have kind of 1 minute left. And so I wonder if we can just pray for people.
Yeah, for sure.
That would watch this. Do you want to pray or you want me to? Or
I'll pray.
okay.
Yeah. Crank out a 30-second prayer. I just bring before you all the people who are going to hear this. And I bring people before you who need to hear it. I pray that you would carve the path for it to make it to them. And then you would just amplify this story that you've given me to tell tenfold. I ask that you would give each and every person faith to believe and healing at all in you, and that you would work the same miracle, if not more and more and more in their life that you've done for me, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, Lord. I just ask that you would heal them and increase faith through this testimony. And yeah, Lord, we love you and we bless them in your name. Amen.
Amen.